Donald Trump, Narendra Modi. Two names that sent shockwaves through the world. One, a brash businessman. The other, a lifelong political operative. Both outsiders, both promising to upend the status quo. Their victories weren't just electoral wins, they were cultural earthquakes. They exposed a deep dissatisfaction with the establishment. People were tired of the same old, same old. They craved something different, someone who spoke their language, someone who understood their anxieties. Trump, a reality TV star, was a master of branding. He knew how to grab attention. He wasn't afraid to say what was on his mind, even if it ruffled feathers. Modi, on the other hand, had a more disciplined approach. He built his career from the ground up. He presented himself as a strong leader, a man of action. Both men tapped into a vein of populism that resonated with millions. Their campaigns were unconventional, to say the least. Social media became their weapon of choice. They bypassed traditional media outlets. They spoke directly to the people. They rallied their base. They energized their supporters. This direct connection was key to their success. It allowed them to control the narrative, to set the agenda, to become larger-than-life figures. The world watched in astonishment as they ascended to power, one in the world's oldest democracy, the other in the world's largest. Their victories were a sign of the times, a testament to the power of populism, of a yearning for change, no matter how unpredictable. Both Trump and Modi campaigned on a platform of change. They promised to shake things up, to drain the swamp, to make their countries great again. This message resonated with voters who felt left behind, who felt ignored by the elites, by the political class, by the media. Trump vowed to bring back jobs to America, to renegotiate trade deals, to put America first. He promised to build a wall, to crack down on immigration, to restore law and order. His supporters cheered him on. They saw him as a savior, a man who would finally fight for them. Modi, for his part, promised economic growth. He pledged to create jobs, to improve infrastructure, to root out corruption. He appealed to Hindu nationalism. He spoke of a resurgent India, a global power. His supporters saw him as a strong leader, a man who could deliver on his promises. Their promises were bold, some would say unrealistic, but they captured the imagination of the people. They offered a vision of a better future, a future where their voices would be heard, where their concerns would be addressed, where their countries would be respected on the world stage. This message of hope, of change, was intoxicating. It transcended traditional political divides. It appealed to people across the political spectrum. People who were tired of the status quo. People who were looking for a leader who would shake things up. Whether they could deliver on these promises remained to be seen. But one thing was for sure, they had tapped into a deep well of discontent, and they had forever changed the political landscape of their countries. Trump and Modi harnessed the power of nationalism. They appealed to a sense of national pride, of shared identity. They promised to put their countries first, to protect their interests, to restore their greatness. This message resonated in a world grappling with globalization, with rapid technological change, with a sense of uncertainty about the future. Trump's America First rhetoric struck a chord with many Americans. They felt that their country was losing its way, that it was being taken advantage of by other countries, by global elites. They longed for a return to a time when America was respected, when it was feared. Modi, too, tapped into a deep well of national pride. He spoke of India's ancient heritage, of its cultural richness, of its potential to become a global superpower. He promised to restore India to its rightful place in the world. Their brand of nationalism was not without its critics. Some saw it as exclusionary, as divisive, as dangerous. They argued that it was based on fear, on resentment, on a rejection of the other. But for their supporters, it was a source of hope, of empowerment. It was a way to reclaim their identity, to assert their place in the world. Trump and Modi understood the power of connecting with people on an emotional level. They spoke to their hopes, to their fears, to their aspirations. They presented themselves as men of the people, as outsiders battling against a corrupt establishment. This direct connection, fueled by social media, allowed them to bypass traditional gatekeepers, to control their message, to build a loyal following. They were the masters of their own narratives. Their rise to power marked a new era in politics. an era where emotion often trumped reason, where identity politics reigned supreme, where the lines between truth and falsehood became increasingly blurred. Birds of a feather, similarities in style and substance. At first glance, Donald Trump and Narendra Modi might seem like an odd couple. One, a flamboyant billionaire with a penchant for Twitter tirades. The other, a disciplined, teetotaling leader with a background in Hindu nationalism. However, look beneath the surface and striking similarities emerge. Both men are masters of populism, tapping into the anxieties and aspirations of their respective electorates. Both Trump and Modi rose to power on a wave of anti-establishment sentiment. They promised to shake things up, to challenge the status quo, to put their countries first. They appealed to voters who felt left behind by globalization, ignored by the elites, and disillusioned by traditional politics. Their campaigns were unconventional, fueled by social media and a direct connection with their base. They bypassed the traditional media, often portraying themselves as victims of biased reporting. Their policies, too, revealed common threads. Both leaders adopted a hardline stance on immigration, promising to crack down on illegal immigration and protect their countries from perceived threats. Trump's infamous border wall and Modi's controversial citizenship law, while different in scope and implementation, both reflect a desire to control who enters their respective countries. Furthermore, both leaders embraced a brand of economic nationalism, promising to protect domestic industries and bring back jobs. Trump slapped tariffs on goods from China and other countries, while Modi promoted his Make in India initiative. Their critics argue that these protectionist policies are ultimately harmful, hindering global trade and hurting their own economies in the long run. Despite their stylistic differences, Trump and Modi share a remarkable ability to connect with their supporters on an emotional level. They present themselves as strong leaders, unafraid to challenge the status quo and fight for their people. Their rhetoric often veers towards the divisive, playing on fears and anxieties to solidify their base. Love them or hate them, navigating criticism and controversy. Donald Trump and Narendra Modi are arguably two of the most polarizing figures in modern politics. Their rise to power has been met with a mixture of adulation and apprehension, both at home and abroad. Supporters hail them as strong leaders, unafraid to challenge the status quo and put their countries first. Critics, however, view them as demagogues, exploiting fear and division for their own political gain. Both leaders have been accused of eroding democratic norms and institutions. Trump's attacks on the media, his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results, and his cozy relationship with authoritarian leaders have raised alarm bells about the future of American democracy. Modi, for his part, has been criticized for his government's crackdown on dissent, its targeting of journalists and activists, and its increasingly Hindu nationalist agenda, which has alienated India's minority communities. Their policies, particularly on immigration and religious freedom, have drawn international condemnation. Trump's Muslim travel ban and family separation policy at the US-Mexico border sparked outrage globally. Similarly, Modi's citizenship law, seen as discriminatory against Muslims, has been criticized by human rights groups and foreign governments. Despite facing intense scrutiny and criticism, both leaders have remained popular among their core supporters. They have successfully cultivated a narrative of being outsiders fighting against a corrupt establishment, determined to restore their respective countries to greatness. Their supporters often dismiss criticism as biased or politically motivated, further deepening the polarization. The legacy of Trump and Modi will be debated for years to come. Their rise to power reflects a global trend of rising populism and nationalism, fueled by economic anxieties, cultural anxieties, and a distrust of traditional institutions. Whether their brand of politics will ultimately prove beneficial or detrimental to their countries and the world remains to be seen.